Our reading this morning is a poem, slightly abridged for those of you who may be familiar with it. It's called Making Peace by Denise Levertov. A voice from the dark called out, "The poets must give us imagination of peace, to oust the intense familiar imagination of disaster. Peace, not only the absence of war." But peace, like a poem, is not there ahead of itself. It can't be known except in the words of its making, grammar of justice, syntax of mutual aid. A feeling towards it, dimly sensing a rhythm, is all we have until we utter its metaphors, learning them as we speak. A line of peace may appear if we reconstructed the sentence our lives are making, revoked its reaffirmation of profit and power, questioned our needs, allowed long pauses. Peace is known in the words of its own making. I want to begin today with a question that I often find myself asking when I'm sitting in worship on a Sunday morning, and that is, why are we here? And I don't mean that in a big existential way, thinking about life and death. I mean it completely literally, simply thinking about what exactly is gathering us together in this building, in this moment. Because there is something about the way that we meet that feels unique. It's a different kind of being with one another than any other place or situation that we find ourselves in. Because there are other situations where I meet friends and strangers, other occasions where I sing songs, other environments where I have enriching conversations on interesting topics or questions, and other spaces where I engage with poetry and writings from faiths around the world and across history, but what we do here feels a little different. And it's more than just the fact that we slapped the word worship on it. It's true that intention and expectation are powerful tools to shape the way that we see the world around us. But I think the times that I've showed up to worship feeling distracted or down or troubled without any expectation that I would feel a particularly spiritually moved way, on those days I can still find myself drawn to something more, feeling some of that magic that comes with a worship experience. It's more than the sum of its parts. And because of that, it's hard to exactly put your finger on it. And I'm not trying to be vague here on purpose. But with a non-creedal faith like ours, the quick and easy linguistic shortcuts around religious spaces don't work for us. We don't all believe the same things about the cosmology of the world. We don't view the divine in the same way as each other. We don't have common shared private practices. None of these things explain what brings us together, and this is why I ask the question, why are we here? And one concise, pithy, somewhat academic answer that I find myself coming to, the answer I would give if someone was asking the question directly of me, is that we are engaged in the beautiful UU tradition of creating sacred space. And right off the bat, I want to emphasize that I'm not talking about physical space. While I think this is a beautiful building that we are in, I'm grateful and honored to be here in this meeting house with all the history that comes with it, the people that have made it what it is. It doesn't explain why we're here. We're not here for the building. And it doesn't mean physical proximity either. To everyone joining us on Zoom this morning, I'm also very much talking to you when I'm speaking about who is responsible for contributing to this creation of sacred space. Rather than a reflection of the physical surroundings that we are in, creating sacred space is something that can happen anywhere and with any group of us. And it's not just limited to times that we call worship. When you show up for someone in a time of need or in community and in the spirit of unconditional love and togetherness, you are also creating sacred space. One of the most influential UU theologians in our history was James Luther Adams, who wrote that holiness or sacredness does not come from institutional hierarchies, fixed creeds, or consecrated stone, but instead results when individuals choose to enter into covenant with one another. That is where the divine emerges. That is where the sacred is felt. And by covenant, Adams simply means that we are intentional about how we are choosing to show up for one another. We're intentional about showing up as loving, growing, changing, authentic selves. And in that sense, the lack of a shared creed or belief is not something that distances us from the sacred, but actually helps us center the sacred in our community. Another influential UU theologian, Rebecca Parker, echoes this sentiment and extends this covenantal sacred connection to how we show up for the world around us. She writes that blessing the world begins in the sort of sanctuary space we are in, where we choose to be vulnerable and close with one another, because this practice of human connection is one that we cultivate here and then take with us. And all this is great, and it's really beautiful, and I do appreciate knowing that what we are doing is tied to 2 centuries of Unitarians and Universalists who we can relate to in our own ways, but it feels a little wordy, don't you? It's a little abstract. It's a little too much thinking, not enough feeling. So what I actually want to do this morning is to spend some time thinking of some metaphors and images to help me understand what's going on here. When I say the words sacred space, I don't want to think about what James Luther Adams had to say about it. I want something to pop into my mind's eye, some image or sensation. So I asked some friends of mine, other people involved in worship and spiritual care, to brainstorm some images that capture part of what sacred space feels like. And so my friend Ashley, another UU Ministerial intern, brought up the idea that sacred space can feel like a bubble. I brought props. So I mean the type of bubble that you get when you take soapy water and a bubble wand to blow beautiful, perfectly round bubbles into the air. And the idea is that the sacred space is inside of these bubbles, floating through the air. This image works on many levels. The bubble is something that requires preparation. It takes forethought and intention. The bubble itself can be small, like the ones that I make with my bubble wand, but they can also be huge, if you've seen the people that have those string contraptions. I've never been inside of a bubble, but I can imagine that there is an ethereal quality to it. The outside world is still visible, but maybe with a slight rainbow sheen as the light going through the air is refracted through the surface of the bubble. And I imagine that the inside of the bubble is pretty quiet and peaceful and centering. But the problem with the bubble image is that bubbles are famously fragile. None of the ones I blew are still here. The tiniest speck of dust comes in contact with them, and they pop and completely fall apart. And this fragility is kind of hard to square with what we talk about when we mean sacred space, where we really seek a sort of resilience to cultivate, a feeling of empowered interdependence even when facing challenging circumstances. So, in response to that, another friend of mine, Jesse, a rabbinical student, offered the image of a house of mirrors to represent what sacred space feels like. I just have the one. And it's the sort of house of mirrors you might see at a fair or a carnival where all the walls are mirrored, and it kind of plays with your perception. And the idea behind this is that the light and the goodness of the world is something that we have the ability to reflect and shine and give back and give forward. Even just a slight sliver of light in a room full of mirrors can fill the whole space. And mirrors are useful tools for expanding what we can see. A mirror can provide new perspectives on things you might not be able to see otherwise. But they're always honest and clear. They don't make anything up, without falsehood or pretense. And in this metaphor, we are called to think about the ways that we reflect and show up in the world, what we call attention to that needs to be seen, what we may see, what we may not see. But on the other hand, this metaphor also has some problems. If you've ever been in one of those carnival mazes where all the walls are mirrors, it's an extremely disorienting place to be. You can see around corners and behind you, but you also see a confusing and dazzling array of things that can make it difficult to move safely. And that's not what we want from our sacred spaces either. We welcome questions and doubts, but we don't want to create feelings of unsafe confusion in our exploration. Another option I'm personally fond of when it comes to imagining sacred space is the idea of a loom, a big contraption that is used to weave thread into cloth. I just have the cloth. Because just as the act of making meaning from pieces of existence and wisdom is part of what we do in our sacred spaces, so simple strands of wool or cotton come together into something that is completely new and different from its component parts. The loom is a tool that humans have used for millennia, from ancient times to now. It's universal and yet in a multitude of forms, with both practical and mythical importance to cultures around the world. In this metaphor, the loom is the space we create, our surroundings that facilitate our being, and each strand is us, contributing to the whole. And yet, like the other two examples, there are problems with seeing sacred space like this. Yes, the images of togetherness and creativity are evocative, but everyone is expected to fit into a set pattern. Weaving goes only in two directions. And I love how different and wacky we can be. I don't want sacred space to be a time for us to feel pressure to conform and align perfectly. So the loom also kind of works and kind of doesn't. And to be clear, just to set expectations, this sermon is not going to end with me telling you what the perfect image for sacred space is. I have more ideas, more objects, more experiences that capture part of what is sacred space. I'm drawn to the organic building techniques of a sandcastle that is made by dripping wet sand onto a base. I think there's wisdom in thinking about sacred space as a stew that everyone contributes to with a big bubbling pot in our midst. I think there's wisdom to be found in identifying as parts of a thriving forest ecosystem. All of these have lessons in them, and also have lessons why they are not the end point of this thought. And I encourage you to do the same. Try and think of an image or an idea that captures what it feels like to be in a sacred space. And if you think of a good one, please share it with me. I'll mingle after the service. But the reason I think this exercise is one worth doing is not to find finality in answers, but that the act of imagination, especially when we apply that imagination to the world around us and the people in it, is itself an important and sacred thing. Sacred space is itself the active process of imagination. By thinking through these images, we find our way to imagining whole new ways that the world can be. If we imagine safety without fragility, we transform the image of the bubble. If we imagine clarity without confusion, we transform the image of the mirror. If we imagine unity without forced conformity, we transform the image of the loom. And by thinking through all these things, we are training ourselves to imagine a transformed world. Imagination is, by its very nature, the act of not seeing what is, but seeing what could be. And there is so much that is possible. A world more deeply grounded in love and fellowship. The addressing of immediate and urgent needs of food and shelter insecurity in our communities. Standing up to the cruel and the unjust, the pursuit of a more equitable and sustainable way of being in the world. These call for an imagination that is deep and powerful and relies on all of us. A moral imagination that is grounded in the sincere wish for the well-being of others. And in order to make that future, we must first imagine what it could be. When I am sitting in a worship service on a Sunday morning, and I'm thinking to myself, why are we here? This is what I want, what I need to center. We are here because we are co-creating a sacred, imaginative space. A place where we can grow, change, and imagine new ways of being. New ways of being ourselves, new ways of being with one another, and new ways of being with the world. Always, always imagining more. May it be so.